Hey, welcome back to the SNS College Football Podcast. This is the Week 8 episode. I'm going to recap some Week 7 stuff and then get into our winners and losers for the week. And then preview Week 8 games that's going to uh, contain Oregon at Washington, Arizona State at Utah, and Michigan at Penn State. Not the greatest slate as far as watchable games, I would say, this week, but certainly still some decent ones. And then, as always, we'll get into our Week 8 bets at the end here, which is going to be, I think, the segment that a lot of you guys are looking for. So, Addison, let's start with the Red River shootout. Your thoughts on that game as far as, I think we were all a little surprised with the defensive effort from both teams, but, what do you think about that game overall and your thoughts on both those teams now moving forward?
Yeah, the amount of defense was surprising in this game. I definitely think Oklahoma looked like the much better team throughout. They did have issues when they got in the red zone, and that was the biggest reason why this game ended up close on the scoreboard. Some turnovers in the red zone that they could have really pulled away early. Like they were in danger of, or Texas was in danger of getting blown out early, I thought. But getting some of those key turnovers allowed them to stay in the game. Oklahoma, the most impressive thing about this game was just how much pressure they were able to bring on Texas. They ended up with 9 sacks. So that was the huge key for them defensively, able to keep, a Texas offense that had been playing really well this season. They held them in check for the most part. So, Oklahoma, if they could play this kind of defense, coupled with the offense, the way it's been playing at a historic level right now, really dangerous team going forward. Definitely a much better defense than what we've seen the past few years from Oklahoma.
Yeah, they certainly were flying around to the ball, and I thought their pursuit angles were good. I thought they were filling the right gaps. You can tell that Alex Grinch is really changed that dynamic as far as that side of the ball for them, and that could be a little teaser as far as a winner later. But Tolman,
another thing for Texas, the whole game it seemed like they had bad field position.
Yeah, no, they certainly did. I mean, they, like you said, I think Oklahoma, I think they had 4 more yards per play. And like we said, Texas did a great job as far as their red zone defense. But they definitely were behind the 8 ball as far as field position. I think Ellinger, whatever it is, I don't think he played particularly well. And part of that is I think Texas was just a little shell shocked by how fast Oklahoma was getting to the ball. But Tolman, is moving forward with Oklahoma, are we really now just wondering, is this a matter of is Hurts his red zone issues, him under pressure, is that really the only thing that we're looking for now as far as improvement from that team, or do you still want to see a little bit more from another, area on the field as far as that's concerned?
I've been really impressed by the defense, so I've seen the improvement that I need to call them an elite team and keep them, in my top group of teams that is really, really contending for the college football playoff. I think the red zone, just like we saw this past week, is been the biggest issue, and it's really, really, I think, related to Hurts. He can be a little careless with the ball. Some throws fading away when he should really just throw the ball away. So if that's something that they can fix, then they're going to be right there in the top 4.
Yeah, for sure. I have them in my top 4 right now as far as just even just plain power ratings, and I got a lot of shit from people saying that I should have had LSU higher than them, and I'm not going to argue with those people. I think that's totally fine. If one of you guys had LSU higher, that's fine. But I really like what I saw from Oklahoma's defense, and if if something offensive for them is going to be like the main issue, I have full faith that Lincoln Riley is going to help scheme, around that and hurts his legs. I think that's going to help a lot as far as, them designing some, or game planning and getting better in the red area. I think him being a dual threat is really going to help them with that. So he definitely needs to take better care of the ball, but for sure an impressive win. So we'll move on to Alabama and A&M. I really don't have a whole lot to say about this game, guys. I just think it's pretty impressive what Alabama's doing offensively. I still think there's some work left for them to do as far as defensively. But Tolman, did that game go pretty much how you expected it to go?
It went the exact way I thought. I thought that Alabama was going to be in control and hold a consistent double-digit lead throughout the game. They did, and then towards the end, it was in the range of, was Texas A&M going to backdoor cover? Alabama's defense gave up a couple of surprisingly explosive plays, and that's been a bit of a problem for them this year compared to the way they have been. But Texas comes in with the backdoor cover, but Alabama was just very, very efficient and explosive offensively.
Yeah, I think, as you said, Bama's definitely struggling a little bit with, their rush defense. I think their young linebackers are struggling, and they, a couple of those kids weren't expecting to play yet this year. Alabama's lost 2 linebackers this year already, but one in the preseason, and then Dylan Moses, I think it was week 2 or 3. But their offense is so good that their defense doesn't have to be, as elite as it's been. But I do think they would like to clean up some stuff before they certainly get to a few weeks from now when they play LSU. But Addison, did you have any thoughts on Alabama A&M, or we can move on to the next game if not?
I don't know. Another game where A&M has a big game at home and they don't look that great.
Yeah, certainly I think they've underwhelmed at Kyle Field for a long time. I know there's a lot of pro money on A&M in this game. But they're just young. I expect them to be a lot better this year, but I don't really think we're going to be talking about them a whole lot the rest of the year. That's why I mainly want to talk about Bama. But
they have some really tough games left. And
they do.
One point of clarification: that backdoor cover was depending on what number you got. I think it was between 17 and 20 the whole week.
Yeah, I think most that bet the game had it around 17 or 17 and a half, so they probably didn't get quite there, but if you got an early number, then you certainly kind of snuck it in there. But Addison, we'll move on to a game that probably doesn't really need to be talked about a whole lot either. Sparty at Wisconsin. Certainly, this did not go quite like we thought. But Addison, right now at this point in the season, it could be a combination of both. But I think, were you more impressed by Wisconsin in this game, or do you think Sparty's just not quite as good as we thought they would be?
Well, I mean, it's pretty impressive. Wisconsin defense is now, through 6 games, had 4 shutouts. And this game, they only allowed 149 total yards. They held the ball for 39 minutes. So I'd say I've been more impressed by Wisconsin, just because they've been doing this consistently every week.
Right.
So I just think it's more indicative of what Wisconsin is, because they've been pretty consistent.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to add. I just think that it could be a combination of like Sparty. Their offense just isn't doing enough, just like last year. I think the defense is getting a little worn down because I still think it's a good defense, but they just can't be on the field for that long. And I don't think it helped that they played OSU the week before, certainly. But Tolman.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Tolman, as far as
nick some points on this game, like Michigan State, they didn't do that bad against Wisconsin running game, I thought.
Right.
Like Wisconsin they popped a jet sweep for a touchdown, 66 yards.
Right.
If you take that away, like they only gave up 80 yards to Jonathan Taylor, 3 yards a carry. Actually, the biggest story of Wisconsin's offense, I thought, was Jack Cohn, who was 18 of 21. it was only for 180 yards, but he kept the sticks moving, and that's like one of the reasons why they were able to hold the ball so long. Like a lot of key third down conversions that were just really frustrating Sparty. They just couldn't get off the field.
Yeah, Tolman, I was going to ask you as far as Sparty's concerned moving forward. I mean, is this getting to the point they just need to fire everybody on the offensive staff? I mean, what are they going to do to stop wasting, elite defenses like this?
Fire the walrus.
Yeah.
That's always my solution. But look, y'all, Sparty I wasn't as high on Sparty to begin the year as y'all were.
Right.
And I know that their defense is playing better than it seems, but their defense should be able to keep them in games regardless of how the offense is doing. That's how they're built, and they're not. Yeah. So they haven't moved up. Or they haven't really moved up or down for me this year. I think they are who I thought they were.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Move on to the next game. This one was definitely a little more competitive, still kind of ugly. Penn State went to Iowa, ended up pulling out a pretty close victory. They ended up covering for most people, most everybody, I believe, actually. Tolman, I'll start with you because I think did you have a bet on this game? I can't remember.
Just the under.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
was pretty easy. Wasn't a very. I wasn't sweating that one out.
Right.
Based on the way that the game was played.
Yeah.
Penn State played outstanding defense. I think they get outgained by Iowa.
Iowa outgained them. Iowa, I think, averaged. Let me see here.
Tolman, 356 to 294 was the yardage.
Yeah, Iowa had they outgained them by a full yard per play, and Penn State won the turnover battle 2-0 zip.
Yeah, look, turnovers were a big deal. Iowa was still giving up a few sacks. Weren't able to convert on opportunities when they had the chance to move the ball, and Penn State's defense made up for a tough atmosphere and a rough night for Sean Clifford.
Yeah, Penn State is they're weird to me. I think they're a very solid team. I think they have the potential to be maybe a team that could move up into like that elite tier, but I just think the offense isn't quite there yet. Iowa's defense this year, it's not like a juggernaut of a defense. Like, it's pretty good. It's not elite or anything. Penn State only averaged like 3.7 yards per play. That's pretty bad. But as you said, Tolman, their defense is starting to kind of come around. This was a defense that we thought heading into this year was going to be very elite nationally, and that's going to be able to carry them. I think if this offense can improve by the time they get to the end of the year, they definitely could still be a player in the Big Ten East. But Addison, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think are we going to see that come to fruition, or do we think they might actually struggle a little bit against Michigan next week? I know we're going to preview that game, but I guess maybe give like a little tease on what you thought about the Iowa Penn State game overall.
Penn State's defense, both defenses played really well, but the Penn State defense made plays. Big stop, last drive of the half. Iowa had a chance to take the lead with a touchdown. They had a first and goal from the 5. Penn State holds them to a field goal. In the second half, the defense forces 2 turnovers as a result of getting in the backfield on both of them. One, they forced a fumble on a handoff, and then the other, they forced Stanley to throw a pick. Both of those turnovers resulted in Penn State touchdowns. So, that was the difference in the game. I thought, the defense put the offense in good positions, and that's kind of that's what Penn State does. This defense is capable of creating those kind of plays.
For sure. Yeah. Obviously, we're going to talk about Penn State in just a little bit on the pod here again, but I think that Iowa, certainly any like small hopes they had for the college football playoff, those are pretty much gone now. But I don't think we really considered them a player. We thought maybe a Big Ten West player, but I think Wisconsin's clearly showing they're the class of that division, and Maybe Minnesota's kind of sneaking around in there, but Wisconsin clearly the best team. So we'll move on to the last game that we previewed last week. That will be Florida at LSU. Tolman, kind of your old backyard there. Your thoughts on that game, and how impressed were you with Joe Burrow again against that Florida pass defense?
I was really impressed, but one of the things that we highlighted last week was how well he had performed under pressure. He saw some pressure on Saturday night. He at times was running for his life, but he continued to make big-time throws. He continued to complete the ball at a high percentage under pressure. Final stats, 21 of 24 for 3 touchdowns and 293 yards. He really got it done. He was the difference of the game. And what also really helps is LSU's receiving core is pretty nasty as well. I think they're just one notch below like an Alabama receiving core. So that's going to continue to go well for them for the rest of the year.
Yeah, for sure. LSU, they averaged 10.6 yards per play. I mean, that's incredible against what we considered, I think, to be a very good defense. They even actually ran the ball a little bit better. They didn't run it a whole lot. I think they popped a couple explosives, but that could go a long ways as far as LSU being a team that, I think the passing game is obviously very elite. It's something that could carry them into the playoff. But I think they could use a little more from the running game if the O-line can improve. The defense hasn't been that. It has been definitely worse than what it usually is, but I don't think it's been that bad. I mean,
they need to get off. They're pretty bad on third down. They need to get off the field.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing I was going to mention is they haven't been great on third down. But as far as just yards per play, it's not so bad. They definitely have some room to improve, and I don't know if they're going to by the time we get to the end of the year. But obviously, with Alabama lurking, I don't know if that total can be made high enough for that game. But Addison, I guess some quick thoughts on Florida LSU. Did this go the way that you thought it would go? Like, did you think it'd be a little lower scoring, or were you really surprised by, how well LSU was able to move the ball on that defense?
I'm not that surprised by what the score was. I was surprised by the ease which LSU just went down the field on Florida like all night.
Yeah.
Like everything was easy, and basically all of Joe Burrow's throws were pretty much to 2 guys, and like Florida knows where it's going and they can't stop it. So Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson were just tearing it up. Actually, Jefferson, 10 targets, 10 receptions. So yeah, they could not stop him whatsoever. And we talked about the running game. Hadn't seen it that much, but they popped a lot of big plays in the running game too. So I mean, that's just one more thing you got to stop too. Makes it so tough. And then probably the most impressive thing was 0 sacks against this 0 sacks allowed against the Florida defense, which we had been talking up so much about how much they how much havoc they create defensively. Going into this game, if you told me that Florida would get 0 sacks, I'd say they have no chance to win. So, LSU give them credit, give their O-line credit for that, and also Joe Burrow. Whenever Florida did face some pressure, he seemed to always escape it and create plays. So, he was Burrow's got some pretty good mobility too. So, if Florida was able to move, I thought they'd be able to move the ball in this game. Like I said last week, it's just definitely not enough to hang with this high-powered LSU offense.
Yeah, I think we learned a little bit more about LSU and Oklahoma, 2 teams that I think we all feel have a legit shot at, obviously making the playoff. I think we think there's probably still, 6 elite teams with maybe, well, I guess.
I have both LSU and Oklahoma in my top 4 right now.
Okay, yeah. Addison, do you have LSU and Oklahoma?
6 elite teams, LSU and Oklahoma in my top 4.
Okay. Is Tolman, is Wisconsin one of those, or is Georgia? Are they outside the top 6 right now for you?
Georgia's out. Wisconsin's 6th.
Okay. Addison, is that the same for you right now?
So do you have Clemson 5?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we have the same probably.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously reasonable. Georgia, we're actually going to get into some Georgia stuff in a few minutes here. I think a little tease, but um, yeah, good transition. Let's get into the Week 7 winners and losers. Tillman, I think as always, you seem to be the one that starts first with some positive news, some winners. So why don't you go ahead and rattle those off?
I'm the positive, nice one that doesn't kill programs.
Well, Addison's the one every week that doesn't. He always says, "I don't really have a winner." So
we'll just all right. So
yeah.
I have multiple winners this week. I actually have I have a player, coach, and team. So player, we're going to go CD Lamb. 10 receptions, 171 yards, and 3 touchdowns in the Red River rivalry. And also, he was just juking guys and breaking tackles all over the place. So it was really, really impressive what he did, not only on Saturday, but for the entire year. My coach is, so surprisingly, Scott Satterfield from Louisville. Louisville was completely just not respected last year. And Scott Satterfield's come in and turned Louisville into a pretty competitive team. They got into a shootout with Wake Forest. They at one point blew a 28-point lead. They had to deal with another quarterback change. They had made a change for the better, bringing in Mikael Cunningham. He got injured. He went out. They came in with Evan Conley and ended up hanging on for a big win against undefeated Wake Forest. And then my team loser is, of course, my team winner is, of course, South Carolina with the big upset, 20-17 in overtime against Georgia. Their secondary was outstanding. They intercepted Jake Fromm 3 times and held him to a 55% completion rate. So we'll have more on little South Carolina conspiracy after the losers.
Excellent. All right, yeah, I'll give some winners real quick. So my winning player is going to be Jack Plummer for Purdue. Sindelar went down with what I believe is a season-ending injury a couple games ago. Purdue was thought to be completely dead for the rest of the year. And I know they played just Maryland, but this Plummer kid in 2 games has looked great. He looks like the real deal. I think Brom knows quarterbacks. And, Purdue is not going to be, I'm not going to say they're going to be good the rest of the year or anything like that, not even close to that. But I think it's pretty impressive that he's able to come in, look this good, take command of the offense, and maybe make it to where they're not exactly like a doormat. So I just thought I was impressed with him. But my winning coach for the week is hands down Alex Grinch. We already touched base on this. His game plan against Texas was unreal. He had those players fired up, flying to the football, taking the right angles. They were tackling in space. They were shooting the right gaps. I think he was a great hire for them. He fits because he understands that, it's going to be tough to just completely stop teams in the Big 12. So it's all about creating havoc, trying to get turnovers, get the ball back to Lincoln Riley's offense. So I think it's a really good fit, and he's doing a really good job. My team winner, I mean, this isn't anything like exciting, but I want to give Wisconsin a little bit more love. It seems like every week when we think maybe somebody might get close to them, we're saying they haven't played anybody yet. And like we said, Tolman said he didn't have Michigan State as high as maybe we did to begin the year, but Wisconsin is just still continuing to dominate. And I know that they weren't quite as dominant against Northwestern, but for some reason Fitzgerald just tended to play Wisconsin well. So I just felt like they were super, super impressive in what they did again. Addison, you want to go ahead and give a winner if you have one, and if not, then just go into your losers.
Yeah, I got some winners.
There you go.
Well, I mean, Tennessee won this week, so
they covered for me. It was one of my bigger bets. Yeah.
Yeah, I had Tennessee too. I mean, as much as I make fun of them, I actually put my faith in them this past weekend, and they came through. 10-point dogs at home against Mississippi State, 120-10, and it was a pretty comfortable cover for us. So I thank Tennessee for that. Oklahoma's defense, I've got them in there too. I was really impressed, and their defense playing this way, if they can continue to do that, just puts them into that upper tier now. Because they've always had the offense, but just the defense was just so bad the past few years that they weren't quite there. With the other teams at the top. And I think it's totally different this year. I think they're a legit national title contender because of their defense. So they're another winner. I've got another defense as my winner. Oregon, another team that I put my faith in their defense last week. That line actually went the opposite way that I wanted it to go. But they only allowed 3 points to a pretty good Colorado offense. So they're the S&P #1 defense this year so far. I know people usually don't think about Oregon and defense together, but they definitely are playing really well this year, only allowing under 9 points a game. So a lot of credit to the Oregon defense this year. And with that, we can get to the losers here.
Sure.
Maryland.
Yeah.
They're becoming like the new weekly loser right now. That line was also weird too last week.
I took Purdue. I thought it was the weirdest thing ever. I was like, this is just kind of blind faith in the contrarian play, basically.
Maryland has been a winner or a loser for like 4 or 5 weeks this year.
Yeah,
nothing in between though.
Right.
That's true. Very polarizing team this year. It was just Purdue surprised, but I don't know, Maryland. They just are playing like shit right now. They look pretty bad.
Yeah.
Next we got Willie, of course.
Oh, God.
Another mainstay in the losers. And another team that I should not have put my faith in. This is stupid. Betting Willie Taggart is just stupid. Don't do it. It'll always backfire on you.
It's come up twice this week. It's a principle.
It
just
has.
Don't do it.
I know. What's funny is whenever I think that Florida State's playing better, no, this happens. 28-0 at halftime. Clemson had been struggling first half of the year, and then playing Florida State, and Willie Taggart was apparently the remedy to that. So now Clemson's probably going to be playing with a lot more confidence going forward. Florida State they were shit.
Yeah. Yeah, they are shit. But yeah. So go ahead. I don't know you had more.
Rutgers passing game.
Oh.
Okay, so last year Rutgers had one of the worst passing games ever. And then first game of this year they played UMass, who we've seen since then is probably the worst team in the country. Right?
Oh yeah.
Right, Nick?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Rutgers threw all over them in that game, and I was like, oh, maybe Rutgers has an improved passing game this year. Since then, that has not been the case. They got shut out by Indiana. They had 1 passing yard. How is that possible?
I don't know. It's not. So you tell me. I don't know. It's insane.
I don't understand.
Yeah. Go ahead.
1 passing yard. That's just. I can't believe that is happening in the 21st century.
That's how it's possible. It happened. This is like stats from 1932.
I know. It's like when they played Princeton. They probably had more passing yards then.
I don't think they passed the ball back then. I think it was like a weird kicking contest.
They didn't, but they still only had 1 more passing yard.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me when these talking heads on these networks talk about Rutgers should consider this coach, and it's like, what makes you think that any of these coaches want to go there? I think that if you're a coordinator or something, or a FCS head coach, and it's your chance to coach a Power 5 school, I guess but it's going to be so hard to win there and people are like, well, they can recruit Jersey. No, they can't because Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, all the schools around that area that are just better, they take all those kids. So it doesn't look good for Rutgers moving forward. Like, they can't be worse than what they are, I guess. But what's better? 4 wins a year? I don't know. I mean, that's just pretty bad. But Addison, is that it for your losers?
No, not quite.
Oh wow. Okay, go for it.
Last one, Georgia's passing game. So this looks like a kind of a problem with this team, I'd say. Out of the elite teams that we've been talking about, there hasn't been really any glaring weaknesses, but I'm starting to think that Georgia's passing game, and it's not on Fromm. I don't know. The receivers just seem like they're not getting a lot of separation. It's a pretty conservative passing game, I would say. Not a lot of big play potential. They're not. If teams can, their running game is great, but if teams are just going to focus on the run game and they can take that away, then Georgia really starts to struggle on offense. From through 51 passes, only 295 yards, so and 3 picks, not really efficient at all. We had some questions about this after seeing them play Notre Dame this year, and then it kind of reared its head again in the South Carolina game. So it's definitely a concern for me now for Georgia.
Yeah, that's a good transition, Addison, because that's my first loser is actually going to be from / the Georgia offensive coaching staff. Everything you said, I don't really need to repeat it. I actually do throw a little bit more of it on Fromm, not the majority of it. And I know if Corey ends up listening to this pod, he's going to give me shit for hating on Fromm like usual, but I like Fromm. I think he's a good player. I just think that he has not shown me in his career that he can be very good under pressure. And I think part of that is that Georgia doesn't put him in the best spot to succeed. Their game plans are usually ultra conservative. I really think they should let him throw more and they should open it up a little bit more on first down. But the problem also is even just with the passing game itself, it just, as you alluded to, Addison, it's too much check down shit. And even if they've got some routes drawn up, these plays drawn up to where he's going to be looking more down the field, I think he's pressing a little bit. I think he's choosing to check it down a little bit quicker than what he should. And part of that, though, is, maybe his receivers aren't getting open. And I think you can tell with 2 of the better defenses that they played, these receivers, they're definitely struggling to get separation. And that's a serious problem because Georgia's defense is good, but teams like Alabama, Oklahoma, LSU, and Ohio State, they're not going to be stopped offensively. You might be able to slow them down a little bit, but Georgia's not going to be able to keep up with those teams if they can't score. They got to be able to score through the air, and they're just not doing that. So, yeah, definitely a couple losers there. Toledo for losing the battle of I-75 to Bowling Green. This year, it is unacceptable to lose to Bowling Green, to Akron, to UMass, to Rutgers. If you are a Power 5 team and you lose to one of these teams, you are automatically a loser on the pod the following week. Toledo, that was an atrocious effort. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Kevin Sumlin, again. I mean, this is like Willie Taggart. This could be a little more my hatred for Arizona not being able to cover the 6. But every time it feels like Arizona or a Kevin Sumlin team is in a spot to maybe kind of let the college football world know that they're around and maybe they are somebody to be reckoned with, they just blow it. He gets out coached. They get destroyed defensively. Their defense gets destroyed essentially. Khalil Tate had a couple of horrific turnovers in this game, so I kind of blame him for some of it. But Kevin Sumlin, just one of our favorite losers. I just think he's a fucking terrible coach, so I like putting him on here. Tolman, your losers, and then, our conspiracy corner for the week.
How about a Power 5 team that got blown out by a bottom 10 team? Anybody know? Can anybody tell me who that is this past week?
I can't think of it actually.
Yeah, Vanderbilt lost
Oh yeah,
10 to UNLV.
yeah, that was bad.
Look, every conference has to have their Rutgers, their Kansas, their Vanderbilt, but you still can't lose to a bottom 10 team like that, like UNLV.
Yeah, I'm surprised by how bad Vandy has been.
Their defense is really bad, and that's what Mason's known for. He's gonna get fired.
It's not like we're expecting a lot out of Vandy, but I am expecting more than that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we'll go now into conspiracy corner.
Okay.
And this is the redo of the Will Muschamp conspiracy.
Yeah, my fault.
It's actually gonna crush a conspiracy here. But this all came up when they got off to a rough start. They lost to North Carolina to open the season. They got destroyed by Missouri in week 4, and we want to answer the question: is Will Muschamp on the hot seat? And at the beginning of the year, I thought no, not on the hot seat. He's got a really tough schedule this year. They give him one more year. Then I traveled to South Carolina. I talked with the locals, and they felt that there's a lot of movement for Will Muschamp to get fired. And in fact, after their blowout to Missouri, there was a GoFundMe account to fundraise for firing Will Muschamp. And that is because if you fire Will Muschamp during this season, he comes with a $22 million buyout. If you fire him at the end of the season, he comes with a $19 million buyout. So you're going to have to pony up some cash if you want Will Muschamp out of there. The South Carolina Athletic Department is historically in financial ruin. They are currently $150 million in debt. And under the leadership of AD Ray Tanner, who's notoriously very, very loyal to coaches, they also started a $50 million stadium expansion project. So because of financial implications, I never thought that Will Muschamp had a chance of getting fired. And in fact, I think I looked just before this podcast tonight. There are $0 in both GoFundMe accounts made to the public. So I think South Carolina doesn't have the finances to fire Will Muschamp, and after an upset against Georgia, that's going to improve his job security from a performance standpoint. If they play a little bit more respectable in rivalry games, I don't think Will Muschamp is going anywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. Muschamp, I like the energy that he brings on Saturdays. He's made some real boneheaded coaching decisions before, as far as like being the head coach, like being the manager, so to speak. His defenses are usually always good, and South Carolina's got a brutal schedule this year, but that was a massive win for him, like you said. But yeah, another interesting conspiracy corner segment. So we will move on to our Week 8 Premier Game preview now. Premier Games preview, I guess I should say. We're going to start up in Seattle. I think this is actually a pretty interesting game. We've got Oregon at Washington. I believe that current line is Oregon -3. I think it opened around 2 or 2.5. It depends on, I guess, what book. Tolman, we'll start with you because I know that you have Oregon -2.5. Why don't we start with when Oregon has the ball on offense? What are you expecting to see from them against Washington's defense?
Well, their offensive efficiency has been a little bit lower than I thought I would. They are ranked 28th in offensive efficiency. They are 49th for the offensive rating in the S&P Plus. So hasn't been as efficient, and I thought they would be with Justin Herbert. But one unit that has been playing really well is their offensive line. They got a left tackle, Penei Sewell, who is actually by Pro Football Focus rated as the highest left tackle in all of college football. And they're saying that he's on pace to set some historic marks for grading at the left tackle position. Washington, on the defensive side of the ball, hasn't been as great this year, but historically they have one of the more physical defensive lines that you're going to see in the Pac-12. I am a little I think that Oregon has the offensive line to get going in the right direction offensively and move the ball against Washington. Oregon's also been quite good in the red zone.
Okay, yeah, good breakdown. Addison, do you want to talk about when Washington has the football? Since you did have Oregon's defense last week as part of your unders bet, you kind of have an idea of what you were, what you already looked for and what you've looked into as far as, Oregon on that side of the ball. What can Washington do to find success against that defense right now?
It's been tough because Oregon, giving up under 9 yards of play, 9 different guys have interceptions. In the red zone, Oregon's only allowing teams to score like 57% of the time. Touchdowns only 14% of the time. So, those are amazing numbers. So Washington is going to have to score touchdowns when they get in the red zone. They need Eason to play well. In the 2 losses for Washington, he did not play well. In the other games, he's been really good. So I think the Washington offense kind of goes as he goes. I like the Washington run game. Salvin Ahmed, he's had a good year. He's got a lot of speed. I think the Washington run game is usually on for them, but when Eason is playing well, it takes them to another level.
Yeah, this is. I'm actually pretty curious about this game because, Washington has to have this game as far as if they want to accomplish any of their goals this year. And it's not that Oregon doesn't need it as far as maybe Oregon thinks they can backdoor their way into the playoff. And obviously they don't want to lose to Washington as far as, then they have an L in the Pac-12 standings, and that kind of leaves them not a whole lot of room to breathe, just as far as that conference is concerned as well. But I think you guys make good points. I think that, Addison, you made a really good point as far as Washington has been kind of weird this year. Like, when Easton's been good, when they've been pretty efficient, that Washington offense has been pretty explosive. Their defense looked a lot better last week against a really explosive Arizona team, but obviously it's just a one-game sample. There's been other times where Washington has been kind of pushed around. That's where Oregon might be able to get them on the line. I actually would lean. I'm kind of leaning Washington in this game just because of how much they need this and how much better they are in Seattle. Oregon, historically, has not been a very good road team. So I think this line is interesting to me because I'm not sure Oregon's necessarily that much better of a football team than Washington. I think they might be slightly better, but I think Washington's home field advantage. I think their coaching edge is possibly a big deal. I think Peterson is a lot better of a coach than Cristobal. Cristobal does some weird shit in game that I don't really understand, and there's only been maybe 1 or 2 times where I could have said the same about Peterson in over a decade coaching career as a head coach, and there's been numerous times where I felt like he outcoached his counterpart with maybe a worse team. So this is an interesting game. I do lean Washington right now. Tolman, I know you bet Oregon, and you got it.
Nick. Look, those are all valid points. I think why I'm on Oregon is because just in difference to you, I value Oregon a little bit higher as a better team. I know you think they're kind of even. I think they are a significant notch above Washington, and that's why I think they cover.
Yeah, no, and you obviously, I wouldn't play Washington at 2.5. So I think you got it at the right number if you like Oregon, obviously. Addison at 3. Where do you lean with this game right now? Is it just one of those things where you just want to play it at all, or do you have any kind of lean?
It's tough to say. I would probably have set this at 3 for Oregon -3. So
okay.
Yeah, I don't really have
any
thoughts. Oregon did lose their leading receiver, the tight end Jacob Breland.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So that's a key loss for their offense.
I think it's pretty even as far as like Washington, I believe, lost one of their starting linebackers to like a pretty bad stinger, and I think he's one of their better players. So maybe that's like a wash, but I did see that Oregon lost their tight end.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, obviously, it probably doesn't have much of an effect on the spread, but it's just a noteworthy offensive injury for Oregon. They're going to need their receivers to pick things up a little bit.
Yeah, I really would like to see more from their running game too. If they can get that going, and these receivers that are healthy can come back and get in rhythm with Herbert, that could be a dangerous team for sure, just because of how good that defense is. But we'll move on to another Pac-12 game. We got Arizona State, Herm and the boys going to Salt Lake City to play Utah. Utah is, I believe, currently a 13.5-point favorite. Addison, I guess we'll start with you this time. And this might be kind of ugly to talk about, but when Arizona State has the ball on offense, I mean, what are they going to plan to do to try to score points against that very good Utah defense?
It's a big week in the Pac-12, isn't it?
It is.
You know, talked about there aren't that many good matchups, but there's a big one in each Pac-12 division. So.
Right. Yeah, the winners of these are in good shape to get to the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, Arizona State offensively, Jaden Daniels, he's played all right. True freshman. Solid running back, Benjamin, and what's his name? The receiver had a pretty big year, actually.
I'll get it for you. So just keep going here, yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally blanking on his name.
Yeah, I'll get it. Just keep talking.
Yeah, Brandon Ayuk.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Yeah, so they got
that's it. Yeah.
We've seen Utah. Well, they struggled a lot against USC, so that was against a big receiver, though. Ayuk's not. He's only like 6 feet tall, so he's not going to really exploit the Utah defense that way like USC did. Although Utah's defense has underperformed a little bit, I would say, from what I was expecting for the season. That D-line that had a lot of expectations coming into the year, they have not got a lot of sacks, actually, this year. So they're not creating as much pressure as we thought, and they're ranked a little lower in like a lot of the metrics than I was really expecting them to be. They are still an elite defense against the run, so I expect them to be able to take away the run from Arizona State and force Daniels to throw a lot more, which will be tough. True freshman on the road at Utah is a tough place to play. You don't really want to put him in situations where he's forced to throw. You know what? I actually think this could be an over.
Yeah, I haven't thought a whole lot about the total. I actually booked Utah. Kind of for the reasons you said at the end there. I think stylistically this is a really bad matchup for Arizona State. Herm wants to be physical. As far as if we're talking about, I'll get to Tolman in a sec here, and we'll talk about when Utah has the ball, and I might talk about that a little bit since I bet them. But Arizona State, Herm wants to run the ball. They want to be physical. I think Payne and Todd, they talk about this on their pod a lot, that they are big believers in throwing on first down quite a bit with young quarterbacks, and I believe in that too. Addison, you and I have talked about that for years, getting the running backs more involved in the passing game on first down. I think Arizona State must do that because Utah is not going to allow them to run the ball. Arizona State, their offensive line metrics have been dog shit. Utah's defensive line metrics as far as just versus the run game have been outstanding. I think Arizona State's going to be in a lot of predictable situations, and I think it's going to be really, really tough for them to generate any kind of offense and get any kind of points. Utah on the flip side, and I'll let Tolman talk about this a little bit, but I think their offense has actually been a little bit better than what I thought it was going to be. Huntley has actually been pretty darn good through the air. They are getting Zach Moss back this week. That's a big get for them. He is a very good tailback. But I think Arizona State, they've been pretty darn good as far as not allowing explosive runs. They actually rank very high nationally in that. That's not surprising with Herm at the helm. But they have been giving up some plays through the air. And I think that's where Utah might surprise the casual fan. I think that's where they're going to get them a couple times. But I feel very confident that we are going to see finally a healthy Utah team. And I think they're going to kind of assert their will and show that they're the best team in that division. But Tolman, any thoughts on, besides what I gave as far as Utah when they have the ball in this game, what do you kind of expect to see from them?
Well, yeah, you gave most of my points. So Arizona State is they're only allowing 2.97 yards per carry,
Right.
But a healthy Zach Moss could do some damage there. Even if Arizona State's able to neutralize Utah's run game, the one time that I really watched an entire Utah game end to end was when they played USC, and I thought that Tyler Huntley didn't look that great to me from an eye test. I know he's having a pretty decent statistical year,
Right.
But Arizona State's secondary has been pretty bad. They've gotten torched by Washington State. They've gotten torched by Colorado. So two pretty good offenses. They haven't held up very well. So I think I expect a pretty big game from Tyler Huntley if Zach Moss is neutralized, and I do lean Utah, but I haven't made a bet yet.
Yeah, I think something else to note that I'm not sure how much of a factor this is, but Utah did have Oregon State last weekend, and I'm not saying over their bye that they didn't prepare at all for Oregon State, but I wouldn't be surprised if they spent a little bit more time on Arizona State, knowing that game's going to matter a little bit more. Arizona State didn't have that luxury. They had to play Washington State last week, so I think that's something that it's not maybe a major factor. I could be looking too much into that, but I think that's something to note as well. So, Tolman, you certainly are leaning Utah. Addison, where would you lean on 13.5? If it goes to 14, for example, would you be leaning Herm at that point? Is it worth that much of that kingdom?
I think I would lean Herm at that point.
Okay.
What did this open at? Do you remember?
I believe maybe.
Because I thought it was lower than this.
I think it was 12.5, maybe.
Yeah.
It's gotten a little sharp action on Utah, yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people might be expecting more of the defensive game than what it actually ends up being.
Yeah.
We talked about Huntley. I really like how Tyler Huntley's played this year. And Zach Moss, we know all about him, one of the best running backs in the country. I think Utah could end up getting a lot of points. So, I don't know. I just think it's – because the total's only 48.5.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it definitely – I could see over being the play for sure. I actually want to look up – we can actually transition, Addison. Obviously, we all think that's a game that Utah could certainly make a statement. If Herm goes in there and pulls off the upset outright, maybe we got to start rethinking, how we view Arizona State. But I'm going to actually look up a projected total from a power rating source. But we're going to move on while I'm doing that to Michigan at Penn State. And this line, I believe it depends on the book. I think it's at 8.5 right now. Opened at 7.5. Tolman, I know that you have Penn State. This was one of your stuck in traffic gut picks that you made on Sunday. Why don't you start with let's start with when Michigan has the football, and how you feel about Penn State defensively in that matchup.
Well, Michigan offensively, they are ranked 73rd in offensive efficiency. We've highlighted this all year. Turnovers have been an issue for them, even in games that they've won. And you can expect turnover conditions on Saturday night in Happy Valley for a whiteout. I think the conditions are primed for Penn State's defense, which at home can be very, very aggressive. They have a strong pass rush. Michigan has at numerous times this season allowed a lot of havoc. I think there are conditions for sacks. I think there are conditions for turnovers. And I actually have, in my calculations, I came up with a defensive touchdown and a safety for Penn State, and 8 points accounted for by the defense is a good cover condition. I got Penn State at -7.5.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Penn State is going to create a lot of havoc. I think Michigan is going to struggle mightily on offense in this game. They can't run the ball. Gaddis and Harbaugh are not on the same page. They have no explosion down the field in the passing game. Shea has been very inconsistent and banged up. The O-line is not good. I mean, what are they going to score? 10, 14 max? I mean, I really don't see them scoring really much more than that unless they get a non-offensive touchdown.
And that subpar running game is playing the number 1 rush defense.
Right. So I mean, I don't know. This could be like a backbreaker moment for Michigan if they go in there and they just get completely annihilated. But yeah, Tolman, I totally agree with you on as far as when Penn State has or when Michigan has the ball. Addison, let's go to when Penn State. Actually, Addison, real quick, I wanted to give you that's a good call out on the over because Action Network's got that projected at 57 according to their algorithm, that Utah-Arizona State game. So that's definitely something worth looking at. That
I'm planning on betting it.
Yeah, that's a big discrepancy. These are usually decently close, and they're every week there's usually a few that are pretty off. That one's pretty significantly off. So yeah, good call on that. But anyway, so when Penn State's got the ball on offense, obviously we talked about them struggling against Iowa defensively. Michigan, I think the way I look at Michigan's defense, I don't know if you view it the same as I think Don Brown and that defense, I think they do a good job when they play against teams that just have inferior athletes. I think they struggle mightily when they play better athletes. But, Penn State, I don't think they've been overly explosive on offense this year. What do you expect to see from them offensively when they have the ball?
I expect Michigan defensively to try and make Sean Clifford really uncomfortable. He didn't have a great game last week, only 12 of 24, 117 yards. Michigan's really going to need their defense to play well to keep them in this game. So I look for them to bring a lot of pressure. It could put them in situations where they get burned on some big plays from Hamler or something, but they have to do that to win the game. I think is create some havoc from their defense. So that's what I'm looking for from Michigan defensively.
Yeah, I totally agree. They're gonna have to get extra possessions. They're gonna have to flip the field. Urban used to talk about that all the time. He talks about it on Fox's telecast a lot. They're just going to have to do more to help the offense out because certainly I think Harbaugh knows that the offense isn't going to do shit. So as far as the number, Tolman already has it booked. Addison at 8.5. I know that's not a number that we usually would like playing like a favorite at just because it's kind of like a dead zone. But I mean, if you have to lean, which way do you lean at that number?
Given Michigan's history in these kind of situations under Harbaugh, I would probably say Penn State. They've been terrible as a dog, terrible in big games. What is it like? Their last 20 as an underdog, they're 5-15 against the spread or something crazy.
Yeah,
like
something
that.
bad. Yeah.
1-19 overall.
Right.
Yeah, when they're supposed to lose, they just lose.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great, and you would expect more from Harbaugh. I mean, that kind of adds to the idea that he actually isn't that great of a coach at this point in his career. So doesn't seem to be able to ever out coach opposing coaches in these big games. So. All of that could easily be a really defensive game, obviously, on both sides, and Michigan stays in it. But I also could see Penn State blowing this open and blowing them out like they did a couple of years ago. So given that that's a possibility, I would definitely say Penn State.
Yeah, Addison, that's exactly my line of thinking. I think I would not be shocked if Penn State won like 17-10 and Michigan did cover, but I don't think Michigan can win this football game, and I do think there's a possibility that Penn State can win like 35-10. So if I have to pick, I'm picking Penn State. I just don't love it not being like at a key number really. But I mean, I think Tolman, I know you took 7.5 because you feel the ladder of what Addison, I think, like, and I don't blame you for that. Like, you think that Penn State's gonna smash. So
just to add to it, Franklin has dominated Michigan before, and when Franklin has dominated a team before, he's shown that it can happen again. I think this is a good scenario for that.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think it's I think it's gonna be lights out and good night for Michigan for this year after this game, possibly.
And we all know Franklin does like running up scores when he has opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah, especially when he doesn't like the other coach. That was
no one likes Harbaugh, so
right, and that was very true when they played Maryland. There's a lot of hatred between Franklin and Mike Loxley for some reason. But yeah, nobody likes Harbaugh, so I wouldn't be shocked to see Franklin try to really, if he gets the chance, he's going to run it up on him. But yeah, that'll wrap up our Week 8 games. Certainly a few interesting ones. Let's go ahead and get into the best part, what I think is the best part always of the pod. That's going to be our Week 8 bets, maybe some leans. Tobin, I'll start with you. If you want to give maybe 2 to 3 of your better ones. If you already mentioned some of them, you can give some different ones, obviously. But why don't you go ahead and give the people some money-making opportunities.
One has to be mentioned again. Guys, do not take Wildy. It is a principle.
Yeah.
I got Wake Forest at -1.5. It's probably up to 2.5 now, maybe 2 in some books.
Yeah.
Don't take Willie. Take Wake Forest. Clausen's a good coach. They got to bounce back from a shootout last week. I think coaching will result in Wake Forest covering. Guys, do not take Willie. Stop it.
Yeah, I'm not going to.
Nick, we can debate this one if you want, but I took Temple +7 at SMU.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen numerous times this year undefeated team crawling into the top 25. I think SMU is ranked 22nd right now, and then they've gone down. I think that Temple, their defense has been good at not giving up explosive plays, though they showed some vulnerability against Memphis. But I also, when I was digging into this game, SMU not a great field position team. They don't flip fields very well. They're a poor punt coverage team. So I think that with good field position, Temple can run the ball on SMU and cover 7 in an important American game.
Yeah, I do lean SMU. Now, I do like usually betting Temple as a dog. It's like one of my favorite teams to bet as a dog. I think historically over the last 15 years, they've been the best dog as far as covering the spread. The reason that I like SMU is that I do agree with your point that some of these teams that are sneaking into the rankings maybe for the first time in a while, and SMU, it's been since the death penalty. These kids, they get a little high on themselves. Everyone on campus is telling them how great they are. I think that moment already happened for them against Tulsa. They were ranked. They did not play well in that game. They had to mount a furious comeback to even win that game outright, which they did win in overtime. They ended up having a bye week. I think they're going to get some shit figured out here. Before that, though, they had been very good offensively. They do have some speed, which I think Memphis kind of showed that you can outrun Temple. Temple has been good at stopping explosives for sure, as Tolman pointed out. But, coming off a bye, being down in what I think is supposed to be high 80s, low 90s, dry Texas heat, and Temple is in Philly where it's like 50s, 60s, and not as hot right now. I think that matters maybe a little bit as well. But I think that it's a good bounce back spot for SMU as far as I think they were playing very well. They just had that moment that Tolman talks about that happens with these teams. And I saw enough that I think they could be a little bit of a problem like Memphis was against Temple. And obviously Temple won that game outright. I think they still probably are supposed to cover, but I think Memphis outplayed them. I think There was definitely some turnover luck in that game that us Temple backers were fortunate for. But yeah, that's an interesting one, T. Do you have any others before I move on to Addison's bets?
I do like Florida laying 5.5
Okay.
at South Carolina. I just think it's South Carolina coming off a huge emotional upset against Georgia. I think it's a potential letdown spot. Florida, they need this game. They need this game to stay in the race because they've got tough matchups later in the year against Missouri and Georgia. So I think Florida bounces back, covers 5.5 on the road.
Excellent. Yeah. And obviously, like you said, South Carolina coming off a huge win. I think it could be a good spot for Florida to kind of get right. And not that I think they played pretty well against LSU, but I think those kids are hungry for a win. So I could see them definitely looking good in that game. Addison, I know you only have a couple on there. If you want to talk about those and then maybe some leans you got.
Yeah. So I got Iowa, Purdue under 49.5. I've taken Iowa unders the past 2 weeks. I also took my thing against Iowa State. I'm 3-0 taking Iowa unders this year, so I'm going to keep taking Iowa unders until it fails for me. Iowa, they always seem to be able to hold onto the ball pretty well, so that'll help to neutralize Purdue offensively. And they play good defense anyway. Their offense doesn't really do much as far as putting points on the board. So, yeah, going with that under again with Iowa. I also got Florida, South Carolina under 48.5. South Carolina, going up against that Florida defense, and Polinsky had a knee injury last week, so he'll be gimpy. I don't see them being able to put up a lot of points. I expect it to be a low-scoring game. In that game, if South Carolina had not won last week, I might have considered taking them.
I would have too, Addison, yeah.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, with them winning now, it totally changes things there as far as the point spread goes. And then I mentioned the Utah-Arizona State over that I haven't made it official yet, but I plan on booking that sometime this week. So, as far as other leans, I'm just looking at your guys' best to see which ones I like.
He's so quiet, T, that he doesn't like any of them.
It's not the great. We've been talking. It's not the greatest board. It's not great for betting. It's not great for watching.
It's not.
But
yeah.
You guys should still watch. You guys should still watch. It's college football.
Right.
Just do it.
Right.
It's what you do.
Yeah. The first thing that I thought when I was looking at it is I don't like the board that much, and then I saw you guys started texting the same thing, so we're all pretty much in agreement on that. But I think one that kind of jumps out at me more than others is Oregon State plus 11 at Cal. I mentioned I don't like Cal as much when they're favored. I don't like them in that kind of spot. Beavers have been better for the most part this year. Cal's not going to put that many points on the board most likely. So yeah, that's one that I would look at.
That's still a lean of mine, Addison. For some reason I'm not seeing it on my leans. I don't know if I've still been. I want to look into the game a little bit more. I think the money's going in the way that we would want it to go, being Beavers backers, and I've had a lot of success backing them. I like, as you said, Addison. I think it's a spot that Cal's a double-digit fave. I mean, come on, like we love Justin Wilcox. We like what the defense is doing. I think the offense has played better. I think it depends on is what's his face healthy at quarterback now?
I haven't seen.
We need to look at that because if he's not, it's like an auto bet for Oregon State for me. If not, I might have to kind of look at it a little bit more because he has whoever I can't remember the starter's first or his last name. But
Dylan Bonds
Garbers, is it?
Garbers.
Yeah, Chase Garbers. Cal's coming off a bye.
Okay, yeah, that too. So, all right, yeah, that's one that I think I was leaning as well. I see Corey's leaning Beavers as well. That could be bad for us, Addison, but I'm kidding, Corey. If you're watching, he had a better week last week. He went 7-4. He's back post retirement. So, Yeah, I'll give
Couple more in SN. Everybody in SNS is over 500.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. No, we're doing well. I think we're rounding into the second half of the year. We know what we see out of these teams. We're I think we're figuring it out. But I'll give a few here, I guess. I actually have quite a few favorites this week. That's why this week is just weird. Yeah, the board's weird. I found value in some faves. It's usually dogs for me for the most part. I like Kansas a lot though. That is the one dog I have. That is the best bet for me. Texas possibly is going to be missing like 10 starters. Um, Roach is out for the first half due to his bullshit. I thought it was bullshit that he got called for targeting on that play. Colin Johnson, concussion protocol. I would think that Herman would sit him. I didn't even care to find out if he is or not, but it's Kansas. I think they would sit him. Kansas is off a bye. Les hired a young new offensive coordinator that is like an RPO expert. Apparently, he has written literature on that like offensive concept. I wish I had his name here. This is bad podcasting. I think it's like Brent Dermer or Derman or something. But I don't expect Kansas to be full fledged like RPO experts after just like a few weeks. But I think there's going to be some wrinkles in there that Texas won't have not seen on film. Texas has been not very good against the run this year, and they played pretty well defensively against Oklahoma. It's not a horrible defense as far as that's concerned. They have been pretty bad though as far as like some explosives. It's a lot of it's in the passing game with RPOs that can get you out of position. These young DBs, linebackers, if they're out of position, Kansas might burn them a couple times. I give me the 22 because I think Kansas is definitely covering. Couple others. I like Air Force at Hawaii. I think stylistically it's a terrible matchup for Hawaii. Their D line is trash. I think Air Force is going to control. They're going to control the line of scrimmage offensively. I think they're going to basically play keep away from Hawaii's offense. So I do like Air Force in that one. I talked about Utah. Tolman, one that I wanted to talk about real quick, and this is a funny one to me because I was leaning Cuse, Syracuse earlier in the week, just because it felt like kind of a contrarian play and I wanted to dig more into it. Once I dug into it, it's kind of rare that this happens, but I completely flipped to the point where I am 100% planning on booking Pitt. Pitt is 5th in the country in overall havoc, forcing a ton of forced fumbles, defending a lot of passes. They are very, very good this year defensively, actually. We gave Narduzzi a lot of shit last year for his defense being really terrible. They have done a great job of putting those kids in a position to win this year defensively. They are 7th in sack rate. Syracuse is 125th in sack rate offensively, 96 in havoc allowed. Syracuse is also horrific in the red zone. So I think Pitt around that field goal, or as a field goal favorite, I think that's actually a much better bet than obviously what I originally thought it was going to be. So I like them a lot. Corey has a few on there. I see Duke. Tolman, I think you got Duke also, right? Yeah, I see Duke there.
I got Duke, yeah.
And then you...
I've been getting frustrated with Virginia.
Yeah. Well, after last weekend, or last Friday, that was really frustrating, yeah. Not the best bets. And I mean, honestly, they looked like they were outplaying them, and they just blew it at the end. But it seems like Corey he's got Oklahoma State official now also, Tolman. So him, and I all have Oklahoma State. That's one of those, Tolman, correct me if I'm wrong, that's one of those like trend spots where we have that ranked team again, but we've got the unranked team as a short fave at home, correct?
Yeah, it's that plus like just a must-win game to stay relevant in the Big 12 for Oklahoma State.
And they're off a bye.
Yeah.
I mean, just a lot of factors pointing towards the Pokes there.
It's like a situational thing that I think we all feel good about.
Yeah, I totally agree. So yeah, we've got some. I think even though we don't love the board, we've got some bets that we do really like a lot. Addison, I know you and I are definitely looking at that Utah over now. But either of you got any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I do. Okay. Nick, I do like how you took Georgia to cover 24 against Kentucky. I think it's a spot that they have to bounce back and they have to like stomp just a kind of an undermanned Kentucky team this season. And then Georgia's season's about to be at a crossroads. They have a bye week, and then off the bye week, they've got Florida, they've got Missouri, and they've got at Auburn. So that's 3 huge games that coming off the bye week, if you struggle in those games, you can become forgotten and fall off the national relevance. Or you could get healthy, figure some things out, get those receivers to get some get some separation, and then come back off the bye week and get 3 big wins against high-ranked opponents.
Yeah, I tell you what, Tolman, I'm really glad that you brought up Georgia's schedule, kind of not like randomly, but that, I don't know, we weren't really planning on talking about Georgia at the very end, I don't think. But yeah, I agree as far as Kentucky is just, they're very depleted. They're horrific against the run. I usually never lay large favorites like this, but I think Georgia's going to fucking kill them. So I even got a bad price on it, but I like getting the key number of 24. But that Missouri game.
Is Lynn Bowden still playing quarterback for Kentucky?
I think he could be. I'm not 100% sure about that. I just know that even if he is, I think Georgia's going to run for like 400 yards on them. So
yeah,
that
and
was
obviously Georgia still controls their own destiny for the playoffs.
well. They certainly do. I think that Missouri game is a really interesting one for them. That is a very sneaky game because Missouri defensively this year has been very good. Missouri hasn't been great offensively, but they've been, I think, good enough. I think situation-wise, Georgia will have just played Florida. Missouri is going to be off a bye. Georgia's got those 3 teams in a row that Tolman mentioned all off a bye. Florida's off a bye. Missouri's off a bye. At Auburn, off a bye. Let's say Georgia beats Florida. They get their confidence up. That's obviously a every year rivalry game with the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Then they've got Missouri, who, not that they really should overlook that game, but they do have at Auburn the week after that. And with Missouri off a bye and a team that very defensively could clamp down on what we said, they can make it to where Georgia has to throw the ball a little bit more. That's a sneaky game. I don't think it's foregone that Georgia's going to finish the season with 1 loss, guys. Addison, any final thoughts?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, as far as our bets, you guys can check down in the description box for our up-to-date records, bets for this week that I will fill in there. And otherwise, we will see you next week for Week 9's pod.